might have noticed in the Gospel that it talks about the three kings having departed and that Herod was going to kill the child. Well, we didn't celebrate the three kings coming yet, and we celebrated the Holy Innocents, the death of children, yesterday. So when we look at these Gospels, we have to realize that the Christmas story that we understand is really a completion of the Gospels. It's not like a timeline, so just to be aware of that. But what we see in this Gospel is this Holy Family right at the beginnings of their life. And to put it in perspective is really hard if you've never been to that area of the world. Now we think, well, 2,000 years later, it's a bit modernized. And yet there are still people who live that way. The thing that I could compare it most clearly to was when I was in Mexico for 2 months. And part of our time in Mexico, most of our time was in Querétaro, which is a major city, but part of the time was in a place called General Cepeda. And General Cepeda is up near Monterrey, out in the desert. And many of the people here live in ranchos. And ranchos are like, I guess they'd be comparable to Indian reservations, in so much as it's a group of families, maybe 100 families living together within this small town-like area. And so we would do missionary work at these places where the floors were dirt. It was kind of amusing because you would still see them sweeping their floors with a broom to kind of clean the house. And whenever the missionaries, let alone the priests, came to town, everybody ran out. And those that didn't run out, one person would go over to the chapel and start ringing the bell, because the chapel was really the central part of the rancho. And everybody would come out to see who was here. Now, when we went there the one time, I recall this woman would not permit us to come into her house because she was embarrassed. And she was embarrassed because their houses were made out of mud. And during the rainy season, the ceiling and the roof in her bedroom had collapsed. In fact, it was still collapsed. She was living in her living room and kitchen area. So she was so embarrassed about the condition of her home that she would not invite us in. But she spoke with us. She was so happy to have us there. At another place, we went to the woman's home, and she immediately went away. And we thought, well, where'd she go? Well, she went outside and she killed her only chicken. And she began cooking this chicken for us because we were her valued guests. And so she was in such a hurry and she was doing this. Well, she served us, and we began to eat, and we noticed the chicken was still bloody inside. But we were going to be with these people for the rest of the week. So I made an act of faith, and I ate the chicken. And I've never been sicker in my life. 3 days, I don't even remember what happened for 3 days. I lost. Some doctor told me that it was probably Campylobacter or some other microorganism like that. But it was just, you saw a humble people that were joyful. I mean, we went in there and we thought, oh, these people are dirt poor. They're so poor, they have nothing. And they had everything. Even the children knew their prayers. The children had little rosaries. They were inexpensive plastic rosaries, but nonetheless, it was like their greatest possession. And many of them, we could tell that they were receiving aid from the United States because the children were wearing shirts from the States. And you could tell that they didn't understand the English because some of their shirts had horrible slogans on the front or horrible pictures that we might understand, everything from the Playboy bunny on the front to bad quotes, but they didn't know. They were just wearing a shirt. So we had to discreetly take care of that. But this area is just overrun by the cartels. On our way up to Monterrey, our bus was stopped and boarded by a man in fatigues who said he was the police. And he was offering us protection through gangland. And so we passed the hat around, and everyone gave cash, and he offered protection. And as soon as we got off the bus driver informed us that was a gang member who was offering us protection. It's like the 1930s all over here, really. But what happens is, in this one rancho that we visited, these cartels will sweep through these ranchos, and they take whatever they want. whether it's human or inanimate, whether it's money or food, whatever. They take whatever they want. The missionaries were working with this one group at our rancho on their sewing skills so that they could make blankets and clothing and sell that as a form of income. And we were visiting them 4 months after the cartel went through, and they were picking up their lives. And yet, the way they spoke, they kept saying, well, God has a plan, or God allowed my daughter to live, or God allowed us to keep our home. They were so optimistic about everything, and the faith was truly the center of their life. So despite their dirt floors, despite when I would go into the chapel to celebrate Mass, and these two dogs would always come in and go underneath the pew there, and we'd walk outside and there were pigs just in the open, that for the rancho they had one bathroom. It was almost like a rest stop. They had one bathroom with 4 stalls for guys, 4 stalls for girls, and that was just for the whole town, pretty much. That they would spend a day getting their water, getting their food, or going out and trying to sell things. That it wasn't about, though, oh, I have so much to do today, I don't have time to pray. That was the foundation of everything. That they prayed in the morning. They prayed before meals. They prayed when it was a sunny day, and they prayed when it was raining. And they prayed at the end of the day, and they prayed when they were enduring hardship, and they prayed when they were having a celebration. One rancho where I visited, I was going to celebrate a wedding because the family was related to a family in my last parish. And I get there for the wedding, and the priest who's supposed to do the wedding, he comes up in one of those little VW bugs. It looks like it's been around the block a lot of times. And got out of the car and immediately began hearing confessions. And you think Advent and Lent is tough here. He had the people lining up. And so in the middle of one of the confessions, he gets up and walks over to me and says, do you know how to do a wedding in Spanish? Yes. Okay. And he gave me the book. And then he goes back and finishes the confession, jumps in his car, and he goes away. Now, I didn't even know this stuff. And I'm getting ready to marry them, a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, which was standard. Many of these girls by 14 or 15 can run the household because they've had to. When we speak about the Holy Family, those are the conditions in which they lived. They didn't have time for distraction because they had prayer and work. It's almost like the aura and the aura of Benedictus. They had their prayer, which was the center of their life, and then they had their work just to survive. And so because that was the center, they were always grounded. Like St. Paul says, let the peace of Christ rule your hearts. That was the peace. Over Christmas, and even during Advent, I said, that first Christmas was the perfect Christmas. Not because it was without suffering or difficulty, far to the contrary, but because Christ was in the center. Now, I'm not saying because the child was in the center, because there's many people who don't believe in God who have their child in the center. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Christ is in the center, and then we are all gathered around. When we listen to these readings, some people get upset when they hear these readings. Wives, be submissive to your husbands, or subordinate. Both of those words, subordinate means ordered under, submissive means sent under. And this presumes that your family is a holy family. And if your family is a holy family, and that father is leading the family in the faith, absolutely be ordered under him. Because he's the example. Why wouldn't we want to be ordered under him? If he is part of the holy family, it only makes sense. Yes, I'll be sent on behalf of my husband, because he's leading us in the faith. Yes, I will be ordered under him, because he's leading us in the faith. And love your wives as Christ loved the church, he says. It says in Colossians and Ephesians as well. Love your wives like Christ loved the church. Christ died for the church, just to give us an invitation. And so this is what we are called to be. We're all called to be a holy family. It doesn't mean that's going to be drama-free. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have the dirt floors or have to go and find our water and our food. It doesn't mean that sometimes our lives are going to be destroyed. But if we center our lives around Christ, as they did at first Christmas, well then that peace does not end when all the lights and the garland are taken down. That is the peace that